G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and that you've had a fantastic start to your week, and I hope that you've had a lot better weekend than myself. As you'll know, I took 3 days off and I was incredibly unwell, and I ended up in the hospital for a few nights to try and bring me back to some degree of normality and at least well enough to be at home. And I'm still incredibly fatigued. As you'll know, last week was my 3rd round of chemotherapy. Now, typically in the chemo, I do 1 meal a day, so I'm sort of fasting for 22 to 24 hours, and fasting can improve the effectiveness of chemo. So I tried to fast throughout the chemo, but in day 3 and 4, it got to the point where I couldn't even suck on an ice cube to get down fluids, and I was still vomiting. So it ended up that it was 2 or 3 days with 0 fluids at all, and ended up in a really bad state into hospital, and they were trying to, turn all that back. But I'm feeling reasonably, I guess, okay at the moment, except for some brain fog. But in hospital, I was really under the weather. But legends, enough about me. Of course, we've missed a couple of days and we've got a lot to catch up on. When I left, of course, it was Ukraine had launched a new offensive operation into Kursk. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what became of that. We'll, of course, look at the maps. I want to talk about Toretsk, and I want to talk about fighter aircraft around that area. And, of course, New York Post, they have spoken that Mr. President Donald Trump has spoken to President Putin, and we'll look at some of the comments that have come of this and what may actually further become of that. Now, of course, we've got a lot of maps because we missed a couple of days. So, of course, here's Ukraine in the centre of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas, these are occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. The blue that you'll see on this map, this is ground where Ukraine has moved back into Kursk. If you see blue check, that is ground made in the last 24 hours. Red check, last 24 hours on the Russian side. Now, no changes around Kursk today. Now, Deep State hasn't updated today, neither has Syriac, but we've got a lot of days previous to go over and some geolocations as well. So if we go back a couple of days, what we'll be looking for is the blue check coming out of Suja here, down, of course, to in the direction of Ulanok. So let's open this up and talk about this just a little bit. So look, I've got this map here on a previous screenshot, and what it seems like to me is Syriac, AMK, DivGen, the other mappers, they were showing in the recent week around Guayevo and to the northwest of Pokrovsk that Russia had been making ground in and around this area that I've drawn in. And I believe this offensive to push down here was to try and then capitalize on that push by ending up with some ability to cut off the forces in here and create a buffer zone again around Suja. As we know, the Russians are creeping up on Suja at the moment. But what did take place in here was significant equipment loss, and a lot of this equipment that we saw lost was very important mine clearing, breaching, engineering vehicles, what are very, very important. There's not that many of these really. So yes, it had a level of success for the first day, but that has now petered out. So let's have a look at the maps and talk about this a little bit more. So we have the first Syriac map here, and he shows this movement down, of course, in the same general direction towards Ulanok. Suja district, Ukrainian army launched a new offensive, thus retaking the localities here and reaching the outskirts of Ulanok. And then on his second update here, so he was talking in this area, that Suja district, Ukrainian army continued trying to enter Ulanok. On the other hand, Russian army recaptured some parts of the forest area and re-entered the western part. So down in here, then the Russians had a easterly push in here instead of their typical westerly push, made some ground, and the Ukrainians keep pushing into Ulanok. What is exactly happening in here? It is hard to tell at this point in time, but one thing we can take out of this is Syriac maps is showing the Ukrainians got further than Ukraine's own deep state map. You can tell by this T intersection around Ulanok as well. So new offensive into here, and I spoke about a lot of the vehicles getting taken out. these were engineering vehicles. And we see vehicles like this, and this is off Russian fiber optic drones. You can see this engineering vehicle here, big like plow on the front of it for things like landmines, for tank traps, and clearing roads for more lighter skinned vehicles or non-then engineering vehicles to move through. And there was significant losses in here of vehicles. And I don't understand Zelensky and General Syrsky's obsession with Kursk. I understand that, yes, it may be a card on the table, but it's sure as hell not enough cards to swap back another 111,000 kilometre squares when this is currently 438 at this point in time. It does work informationally. It did work for long-range strikes. So, yes, there's some informational benefit in here, and it does keep media's eyes because all the mainstream media will focus on this and away from the East. But what I will say with offensives like this is Ukraine cannot afford to keep losing these highly trained men and these rare machines up in here if the operations are not going to be simultaneous and successive. Remember what we've spoken about. If Ukraine want to reintroduce offensive maneuver on the battlefield, they need to have simultaneous and successive actions. It needs to be in different fronts and again and again. It can't be one push, it peters out, it stalls, and then you wait a couple of months for something else because it's just going to peak and trough, rather than work on that gain. Even if you see the Russians actually do this well with just successive pushes, and someone gets 1 meter and then they lose 10 vehicles and push another 10 meters, and again, yes, you have huge losses, but this is a protracted attritional war. It's what we'd expect to see. And many people go, well, Russia loses this many vehicles a day on offensive in other areas, and I agree with this. But as well, Ukraine has a shortage specifically on things like those engineering breaching vehicles that can definitely be used in other areas, especially if they want to flip back on the offensive. And in these areas as well, whilst other areas are absolutely screaming for men, you've got your best trained men up in here rather than areas that are moving rearwards. I know Kursk has some value. I'm not trying to take that away, but I think the value that this is adding at this point in time and what is subtracting from other areas, I don't think that calculation comes out in Ukraine's favour. But we'll keep up to date with Kursk. Only today, Zelensky has said that Kursk is very successful and is a main focal point as well. So I want to look down in Toretsk, and I want to look at some fighter aircraft and a weapon system that Ukraine need to employ on the battlefield. That weapon, of course, is fiber optic controlled drones. So what we'll move our way down, and of course we have Toretsk. Now these maps, these all show significantly different. I'll show you the maps in a second. But the footage I want to show you here is a Russian Su-25. A Su-25 is a close air support, slow-moving fighter aircraft. Similar to, like a American A-10 Warthog. Now, let's have a look at this footage. So this is from a Ukrainian GoPro here. He pulls up a man pad. You can see these two aircraft flying in the distance. The man pad then fires. I want to show you some bits in this footage. We see the plane going down in then a fireball. The pilot has successfully ejected from this aircraft. And then we see, after we watch this fireball for a second, we see a Russian Mi-8 helicopter come in for an actual rare casualty evacuation by helicopter. We don't see this much on the front line, and this tells us a couple of things. So I just want to break this down. So we see this Mi-8 chopper on the ground here. We can see 3 service members out here of the Russian forces. Now, what is unclear is if these guys are off the chopper, securing the landing zone, the LZ, or they are actually from nearby positions, because this chopper is getting targeted by Ukrainian drones, multiple Ukrainian drones here, and you can see that the electronic warfare is very effective in missing these. Ukraine is actually unlucky not to have one of those just fall into the rotors. And as you can see, as this Mi-8 leaves, these 3 men move off here. Now, in some of this footage here, you can see, just in here, looking like potentially carrying a stretcher here, maybe. So maybe moving the pilot there, and then those guys left behind move into nearby positions, and the chopper continuously targeted by Ukrainian FPV drones. Of course, these are radio-controlled drones and unable to bring that down. Now, from fighter bomber, he reports that pilot is in hospital recovering. But there's a few things I want to talk about in this. Firstly, let's look at the location of this. So this is Toretsk, Su-25, around about this area. So yes, it could be from nearby positions. We're not exactly sure where this map sits at the moment here. It tends to be because otherwise those guys would have gone with that chopper. But we also spoke about this is a lot of electronic warfare suppression. It is suppressing those drones, and it does also tell us there may be a limited amount of Ukrainian man-pads, because otherwise man-pads would have been subsequently fired at that Mi-8 chopper as well. But this is a very ballsy move from behind the line to pick up this downed pilot. But there's some more in this footage that I wanted to show you that some people are pointing out. Now, let's just have a look at this footage, and I'm going to have to do some pausing here. So what we see is we see this man pad, we see the planes flying across here, and then you see it fire, puff of smoke. So right there. So what we're looking at is before it fires, right here, we can see either flares go off, or as some are saying, the Su-25 had a mechanical failure, or who's actually been hit by another man pad, and see that right there, it has gone down right here before this man pad has been fired. So look, there's nothing in this that tells me beyond reasonable doubt. I don't know, but it's interesting just to look at that. And we don't actually get from this footage here, this is Ukrainian footage, I believe, we don't see any impact on this plane. So again, could it be a maintenance issue? We don't know. There's a puff of smoke we sort of get just here, it was just off screen, potentially, I don't know, but we're just sort of covering all bases. One thing we do know though is these Su-25s are conducting CAS, so close air support, over Toretsk. So this does tell us limited then on man pads, because they are then able to start this again. Now, I spoke that what we need to see in the Ukrainian forces is fibre optic FPV drones en masse. They would have taken out that Mi-8, no problems at all, because they are immune to jamming. So we see things like this, and this is Russian fibre optic drones up, I'll show you the geolocation in a second, up in the northeast, and these are flying into warehouses like this, and this is taking out Canadian Senator vehicle sitting in here. You can see the snow camouflage on this. You can see impact on this vehicle. There's a second one behind it as well. So two of these have been destroyed. No images. We know a strike. And then we can actually see, furthermore, the ability for these fibre optic controlled drones to fly through things like smoke into warehouses and well behind the line as well. So this is taking out that second one here. And then further in the footage, we can see that the amount of smoke then just piling out of these warehouses where of course these Canadian Senator vehicles were, and the ability for these drones to go even through this, maintain a level of clear picture, at least from the signal, and conduct further strikes on these vehicles. And this is located up to the north of Kupiansk, right about here, about 10.2 k's behind the front line. Of course, where Russia has crossed the Oskil up in this direction, it's about 10.25 from the border too, so I'm not sure which direction that border came from. But the reason I show you this, and they failed attack on the Mi-8, was it is, I think, of utmost importance. I've been saying this for now weeks, that Ukraine get fibre optic controlled drones, FPVs en masse. We know they've got a few of them, but we need to see them en masse, because these fibre optic Russian drones are currently having the biggest effect on the battlefield, in my opinion, from the strikes, the successful strikes that I see, the ability to fly down into areas. We've spoke about this, that it's not just jamming, it's the ability to go to areas where radio signals won't like, into underground areas, into buildings, into large warehouses, and we're seeing more and more of that. Now, one thing I've started a Google Sheets like Excel, and I'm going to be tracking fighter jet losses and actually tracking as well UAC. So, of course, today is one Su-25, first Russian fighter jet down for the year, and I'll be tracking United Aircraft Company to see if Russia's production is outperforming their losses or not. Last year, we can't really get a good idea, so this year we will. On fighter jet losses, we did actually see, I didn't speak about it because, well, just a single loss of a jet isn't, massively strategically important, but we did see last week a Ukrainian Su-27 fighter aircraft taken down and that pilot sadly killed, said to be by a long-range missile strike air-to-air of a Russian Su-30SM. Okay, so let's continue looking around Kursk. Around Kursk. So I was reading this. Let's look around Toretsk. So we have the first, then deep state update, first Syriac map update here, and shows more movement around this Kreminski area, around this high point. Now, I wanted to show you, this was off a Russian page, but you can see how high these spoils actually are and how important these can be, not only for actually whatever material is in this can have a large metal content, so it can actually affect your radios, your EW, as well as your drones as well. Of course, not on fiber optics. So that can have a secondary effect as well as for optics as well, to just see bloody further. And then Toretsk front, Russian Army took full control over Druzhba. So this is, oh my God, what have I done? So Druzhba out here. In addition, urban battle in Toretsk is practically over with clashes ongoing in the forest area. So some are saying Toretsk is basically completely occupied at this point in time. Let's have a look at what Deep State has said about this. This is something I think very interesting that we have seen a lot of. Information about the enemy's occupation of Toretsk is not true. Urban battles continue and the defence forces continue to resist the enemy. Once again, news from the madhouse is flying into our information space. Statement from the Ministry of Defence of the Russian Federation. The Defence Forces of Ukraine continue the defensive operation in Toretsk. Fighting continues through the Zabalka neighbourhood, as well as on the northern and western outskirts. The city centre is almost entirely under our enemy. So they're admitting that, yes, the centre is all under Russian control. We're still fighting on the outskirts. But this is important. Unfortunately, people are forced to consume hostile sources due to a lack of trust in our own official ones. And this is something we've seen a lot of, due to then misinformation, disinformation, or not then actually just accepting things that people are looking to other sources and maybe getting then false information. They say the society is still not informed about the loss of Kursk or Velyka Novosilka, which raises many questions for those who form official communication. So Kursk, Velyka Novosilka still not officially lost under Russian occupation. So people look elsewhere, and I think that the information campaigns are having a bit of a further backfire. Now, Ukraine will be getting French Mirage 2000 fighter aircraft. Now, these don't have the capacity of the F-16s, not that we really see the F-16s operating anyway. Sadly, for all those who bought bloody F-16 merch and stuff and the bombs dropping on Moscow. But this is what Fighter Bomber has said. Ukraine seems to have received a batch 2.4, however many, of Mirage 2000s. It was made the last one was made in 07, and it wasn't them that flew to Ukraine, but fighters of an even older design. We don't have such old fighters, particularly in this special military operation you're seeing here in the war, except for maybe the MiG-31 and some other variants we do see flying. They will do the same as the F-16, fly in the deep rear, ram drones, and we did see an F-16 most likely taken down by a Patriot system. And then he talks about, though, that 1 million bonus if you are to shoot down an F-16 is going to be extended onto the Mirage. We know the Russian forces have almost like a Call of Duty style scheme where if you hit something like this, it can come down. So I guess we will see these getting looked at. Russians trying to hit these. We've seen F-16s performing very little realistically. I think because the tactical advantage versus the informational loss of one of these going down, especially with what happened right in the beginning, the first time they were used, one was most likely shot down and the pilot sadly killed by friendly fire. The risk versus reward is very, 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 very bloody tedious in this, but these can fire Storm Shadow Scalp. The problem in that is how many Storm Shadow Scalps are there still being made or in storage? We know everyone's been screaming for the to give Taurus to the Ukrainians. So let's have a look at a couple of things on the map. So I've shown you where this is. Now let's move, actually let's come back down to where we were. So just north of Toretsk, we have Chasiv Yar. Now something interesting, but the road between Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut, unsure if this one or the Ivanivsky one, probably the Kromove one. We see footage that the Russians here are building basically, and we've seen this before, basically telegraph poles or bits of wood with large nets on them for drones. And this really does work because it can just catch the drones and it probably won't set off the warhead, or at least it will preset it off. Works like bar armor on a vehicle you would have seen in the Middle East when the coalition was there. It can work like that and get them away from the vehicles. Probably won't set it off the warhead either. So I think we'll see more and more of that as a cheap fix to a very, very hard problem, of course, which is drones. But that drone warfare has been leveled, if not overtaken. I'd actually say at this point overtaken by the Russians. For most of the war, I would say that the Ukrainians were in front of the Russians on FPV drones and targeting. I'd say with the fiber optics, it has now probably swung heavily in the Russians' favour, which is not a good thing. And we know things like manpower and artillery were already over there as well. So let's move our way, of course, up into the northeast. Of course, this is where we saw, it's right about here where we saw that, I think it's this here, right where we saw that FPV fly into that warehouse with the Canadian vehicle. But let's look at the northeast. Now, no changes shown on this map for a couple of days up in here. This map doesn't like going backwards and forwards anymore for some reason. It's been really glitchy ever since some updates, but let's look on Suryak and what he is showing. So where he is showing, if the best way is to have a look at where these snow areas are and movement out near this Fiholivkia area too. Russia made significant advances north of Dorichnia, northwest of Novomilsk, taking over the locality of Filimivkia. So taking over this area and moving out, at least claimed by Suryak, at least say 2 kilometres if true. We do know there's been significant expansion over the Oskil recently. Let's move to his second update. We've got 3 days of updates in here. Further movement outwards of Dorichnia, you can see where these 2 roads split off. Remember, any area where there's like multiple roads coming in, this can be important for then further movements deeper. So him showing further expansion in here. And then to the south of here too, so Zapadne. So we had our first update here, second update here, third update, taking over this road and on the western side of Zapadne as well. So heading towards this Doroshivkia too. So like I've been saying, definitely watch on this front because, of course, this does put Kupiansk at threat because this is on its northern flank. And that's exactly how Russians like to take areas, is work on the flanks and then pincer it. I've seen a lot of people talking recently of the Russian tactics have changed. They're going for a pincer maneuver on Pokrovsk, this, that. The tactic hasn't changed. You're just now looking at reality. The tactic of pincering things, tell me a large area that hasn't been taken like that for the last years. So I don't know. I don't know what people are looking at currently. Now, of course, the red check on this is indicating ground that's made over the past 24 hours. So we can see the Peninsula boys still out in Avdiivka, a little bit of movement made to the north, of course, in this Kursk pocket, and a little bit around Srebeni, this area coming under most of control as well. Now, what I do want to do is just scroll back to yesterday, and we see that Chasiv Yar had a little bit of ground made as well, and this little bit of ground around Terny. So while we're here, I'll just show you this. This also being shown at least in the same general direction over the Suryak map. So you can confirm there was definitely movement in that direction. So I just wanted to show you there's been some red in here for a couple of days, further movements through areas like Andriivkia, Dashny as well. There was geolocated footage of a Russian flag right about here. Then let's come up to today. Nothing groundbreaking in here. I think the groundbreaking piece will be how are the Russians continuing to expand in the center of a major town, a small city of Andriivkia, if it's like this and not like this. So yeah, strap in. I think that will update in the near future. But let's have a look down in Kursk for now. And we can see further movement being confirmed by Suryak in the centre of Andriivka, not matching up to as far as Deep State showed. We said that last time as well. More movement being made, and Dashny coming under full control by Suryak, so Dashny right here. Further, the last 48 hours, the Russian army took full control over new parts, took control over new parts of Andriivka. Half the locality is under control. So you can see significantly different now to this map, finally showing the westernmost extreme, but showing further south as well, definitely down. You can see where this water runs, so right down in around here. So a fair bit different. So if we go from where we believe Suryak's saying to about here, say about 1.5 kilometres, about a mile different, but of course all the way to Shevchenko is likely occupied in my honest opinion. And then we'll come down, we have a zoom in on Andriivka and more areas in the north coming under control. So again, we will see, but Andriivka is coming under control. Remember, there are large fortifications that sat between Kursk and Andriivka, and the Andriivka fortifications, they protect Constantinople and Ulaki as well. So again, wait and see what transpires on this front line over the coming days. Of course, we'll move up into the Pokrovsk front. Now, let's have a look here. No major shifts over the last few days. Pokrovsk, there are some rumours that Ukraine is about to launch a counter-offensive in here. So I guess we'll wait out and see what happens with this. So we can see some smaller counter-movers being made. So what I'm talking about is people saying a major one, but some movements being made by the Ukrainian forces in here. During the last 3 days, Ukrainian army recaptured a series of positions northeast of Pishani. So we see Pishani Zirove here, and managed to infiltrate the industrial compound at this locality. On the other hand, Russian made new advances outside of Uspenivka. So you can see Uspenivka advancement. That's Uspenivka here, and that the Ukrainians made some advancement in areas in here. There is a lot of footage of fibre optic controlled drones being used around these areas too. Let's move down Pokrovsk just a little bit. So Ukrainian army launched new counterattack in the northeast. So same area again. So this is Kotliny, so making ground down in this direction, of course not being shown on the Deep State map because it never showed the further Russian advancement. Russian army began advancing south of Nadivkia, entered the locality of Zaporizhia from Srebeny. So where we saw this red here, that there is this Zaporizhia, Srebeny. We know that movement has definitely occurred because it's being replicated across different maps. And then we have this Baranivkia, where we see the developing eastern flank of Pokrovsk at the moment. So right in here, where we'll take is see, I called it the other day like the witch's finger. This is this waterway just in here, and towards this Yalez, won't try, that we see that the Russians made some advancement in that direction, as well as it looks like Ukraine maybe made a small advancement back in this direction too by this blue dot. But again, we will see, but definitely movements being made. A lot to be looked out for on this map. I think this map will catch up on some gains in the coming days or weeks. Now, of course, we know Trump wants to end the war, and the New York Post has had this exclusive article. Trump reveals he's spoken with Putin by phone, and he says the Russian president wants to see people stop dying in Ukraine war. President Trump has spoken to leader Vladimir Putin on the phone to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war. Trump has said that he hasn't said how many times that they have spoken, saying I better not say, but he believes Putin does care about the killing on the battlefield. We know the losses for both Russia and Ukraine have been very large. Trump says he wants to see people stop dying. Trump has said all those dead people, young, beautiful people, they're like your kids, 2 million of them, and for no reason. The 3-year-old war, he said, never would have happened if he was the president in 2022. He said, I've always had a good relationship with Putin, unlike his predecessor, of course, pointing towards Mr. Biden, who had no relationship with Putin, but that it looks like Putin may want to end the war. That said, like I've been saying again and again, but at this point in time, with then upper hands on most elements on the battlefield, including kilometre squares and ground taken, Putin will probably have very large requests to end the war, and convincing Zelensky to end at this point in time from a position of weakness is going to be very, very difficult, not only for Zelensky and his superiors, but also society as a whole. Trump says Biden was an embarrassment to our nation and a complete embarrassment. Trump says he has a concrete plan to end the war. He says, I hope it's fast. Every day people are dying. This war is so bad in Ukraine. I want to end this damn thing. The president said, addressing National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, who joined him in his study aboard Air Force One on Friday night, has said, let's get these meetings going. They want to meet. Everyday people are dying. Young, handsome soldiers are being killed. Young men like my sons on both sides all over the battlefield. And looking like, look, the security advisor, Trump, they really want to get this ended. Now, Trump may go into this and just go, at any cost, we want this ended, even if it means Europe is unhappy with us. I want to speak more about Europe and their lack of sovereignty in next coming days when I feel a bit better. Vice President Vance will meet President Zelensky in the MSC, so the Munich Security Conference. That is the 14th and 15th of February. And we've seen J.D. Vance, if you watch him on Rogan, he has spoken about that the end of the war here would probably look like along the borders currently. That said, why at this point would Russia take that as they're still making ground? Trump has said he wants to strike a $500 million deal with Zelensky to assess rare earth minerals and gas in Ukraine in exchange for security guarantees and a potential peace settlement. Now, realistically, when you're talking the US, you're talking minerals. $500 million is the startup cost of a small mine. I think we'll see this number absolutely skyrocket into the tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. Trump, his supporters, and a lot of his staff, they're not impressed by the couple $100 billion sent to Ukraine. We know $100 billion of that is somewhat missing as well. So they will want to draw back some of that money and exchange for the security guarantees. What are we getting? What have you done for me lately out of this too? Now, I just want to speak about this quickly. On Iran, Trump told the Post, I'd like a deal done with Iran on non-nuclear. I'd prefer that than to bombing the hell out of it. They don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. If you made the deal, Israel won't bomb them. He won't reveal details of potential negotiations with Iran, but he said, in a way, I don't like telling you what I'm going to tell them. You know, it's not nice. I could tell them, I could tell what I have to tell them, and I hope they decide that they are not going to do what they are currently thinking of doing. And I think they'll be really happy. So we do know Iran is working towards nuclear weapons, and we have heard at least rumours around Iran maybe wanting to take out a leader as well. Many people have said with Trump's comments about if then I was to be taken out by Iran, then would it be no holds barred that Iran would be, to quote another US leader, turned to glass. And many have spoken of the potential here for some level of like false flag event here to make that then happen for another country in the region. He said, I'd tell them I'd make a deal. As for what he'd offer Iran in return, he said, I can't say that because it's too nasty, but I won't bomb them. So we know Iran has heavy, heavy sanctions against them. Non-proliferation treaty is breaking down there as well. They're working with the Russians, so I guess we will see what exactly happens here. But I think, personally, I think war with Iran is inevitable, if not now, probably in the future. How will that be? Well, we know there's a lot of people wanting to go to that as well. So I guess we will see. Legends, you have a fantastic day. I'm going to go have a rest, but look after yourself and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.